فيها، وهو بلاع تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف ونحله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي، فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين؟ يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها عدج وأبكي لعليم العذاب وشدة أمر طول البلاء ومدتي، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فحمني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وحبلي صبرت على هرنانك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ عن كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناتكا لأضجن إليك بين أهل هذا جيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاكدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتي، وضاق تعم عذابها بمعصيتي، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرتي، وهو يضج إليك ضجيجا مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تولمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أتباكها وأنت تعلم صدقه؟ أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتترك فيها هيهات ما ذلك ظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين به من برك وحسانك، فباليقين يقتو لولا ما حكمته به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماعك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالعنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فاسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية وبالكذيت التي هتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل كبيه أسررت وكل جهل أملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت إثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم وشاهدا لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلته أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي يا من بيدي ناسيتي يا عليما بذري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاكتي يا ربي يا ربي يا أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي في عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العظيمة جوانه وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المباررين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة المؤكنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأريد ومن كادني فكيد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك واكرمهم منزلة منك وخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجاه وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقم يثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بإبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سري الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاؤه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافئ النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بي ما أنت أحلو وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Please let us recite Surah Fatiha and 3 Surah Ahad for all our marhumeens. Al-Fatiha.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. دعاء أهل الثغور for all the مظلومين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآله وحصن ثغور المسلمين بعزتك وأيد حماتها بقوتك وأسبغ عطاياهم من جدتك. اللهم صل على محمد وآله وكثر عدتهم واجحد أسلحتهم واحرث حوزتهم وامنع حومتهم وألف جمعهم ودبر أمرهم وواتر بين أميرهم وتوحد بكفاية مؤنهم واعضدهم بالنصر وأعنهم بالصبر والطف لهم في المكر. اللهم صل على محمد وآله وعرفهم ما يجهلون وعلمهم ما لا يعلمون وبصرهم ما لا يبصرون. اللهم صل على محمد وآله وأنسهم عند لقائهم العدو ذكر دنياهم الخداعة الغرور وامح عن قلوبهم خطرات المال الفتون واجعل الجنة نصب أعينهم ولوح منها لأبصارهم ما أعددت فيها من مساكن الخلد ومنازل الكرامة والحور الحسان والأنهار المضطردة بأنواع الأشربة والأشجار المتدلية بصنوف الثمار حتى لا يهم أحد منهم بالإدبار ولا يحدث نفسه عن قرنه بفرار. اللهم افلل بذلك عدوهم وأقلم عنهم أظفارهم وفرق بينهم وبين أسلحتهم واخلع وثائق أفئدتهم وباعد بينهم وبين أزودتهم وحيرهم في سبلهم وضللهم عن وجههم واقطع عنهم المداد وانقص منهم العدد واملأ أفئدتهم الرعب واقبض أيديهم عن البسط واخزم ألسنتهم عن النطق وشرد بهم من خلفهم ونكل بهم من وراءهم. خزيهم أطمع من بعدهم. اللهم أقم أرحام نسائهم ويبس أصلاب رجالهم واقطع نسل دوابهم وأنعامهم. لا تأذن لسمائهم في قطر ولا لأرضهم في نبات. اللهم وقو بذلك محال أهل الإسلام وحصن به ديارهم وثمر به أموالهم وفرغهم عن محاربتهم لعبادتك وعن منابذتهم للخلوة بك حتى لا يعبد في بقاع الأرض غيرك ولا تعفر لأحد منهم جبهة دونك. اللهم اغزو بكل ناحية من المسلمين على من بإيذائهم من المشركين وامددهم بملائكة من عندك مردفين حتى يكشفوهم إلى منقطع التراب قتلا في أرضك وأسرى أو يقروا بك أنت الله الذي لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك. اللهم واعمم بذلك أعداءك في أقطار البلاد من الهند والروم والترك والخزر والحبش والنوبة والزنج والسقالبة والديالمة وسائر الشرك الذين تخفى أسماءهم وصفاتهم وقد أحصيتهم بمعرفتك وأشرفت عليهم بقدرتك. اللهم اشغل المشركين بالمشركين عن تناول أطراف المسلمين وخذهم بالنقص عن تنقصهم وثبتهم بالفرقة عن الاحتشاد عليهم. اللهم أخل قلوبهم من الأمنة وأبدانهم من القوة وأذهل قلوبهم عن الاحتيال وأوهن أركانهم عن منازلة الرجال وجبنهم عن مقارعة الأبطال وابعث عليهم جندا من ملائكتك ببأس من بأسك كفعلك يوم بدر تقطع به دابرهم وتحصد به شوكتهم وتفرق به عددهم. اللهم وامزج مياههم بالوباء وأطعمتهم بالأدواء وارم بلادهم بالخسوف وألحها عليها بالقذوف وافرعها بالمحول واجعل ميرهم في أحص أرضك وأبعدها عنهم وامنع حصونها منهم. أصبهم بالجوع المقيم والسقم الأليم. اللهم وأيما غاز غزاهم من أهل ملتك أو مجاهد جاهدهم من أتباع سنتك ليكون دينك الأعلى وحزبك الأقوى وحظك الأوفى فلقه اليسر وهيئ له الأمر وتوله بالنجح وتخير له الأصحاب واستقوي له الظهر وأسبغ عليه في النفقة مرفقا ومتعه بالنشاط وأطف عنه حرارة الشوق وأجره من غم الوحشة وأنسه ذكرى الأهل والولد وأثر له حسن النية وتوله بالعافية وأصحبه السلامة وأعفه من الجبن وألهمه الجرأة وارزقه الشدة وأيده بالنصرة وعلمه السير والسنن وسدده في الحكم واعزل عنه الرياء وخلصه من السمعة واجعل فكره وذكره وضعنه وإقامته فيك ولك فإذا صاف عدوك وعدوه فقللهم في عينه وصغر شأنهم في قلبه وأدل له منهم ولا تدلهم منه فإن ختمت له بالسعادة وقضيت له بالشهادة فبعد أن يجتاح عدوك بالقتل وبعد أن يجهد بهم الأسر وبعد أن تأمن أطراف المسلمين وبعد أن يولي عدوك مدبرين اللهم وأيما مسلم خلف غازيا أو مرابطا في داره أو تعهد خالفيه في غيبته أو أعانه بطائفة من ماله أو أمده بعتاد أو شحذه على جهاد أو أتبعه في وجهه دعوة أو رعى له من ورائه حرمة فأجر له مثل أجره وزنا بوزن ومثلا بمثل وعوضه من فعله عوضا حاضرا يتعجل به نفع ما قدم وسرور ما أتى به إلى أن ينتهي به الوقت إلى ما أجريت له من فضلك وأعددت له من كرامتك اللهم وأيما مسلم أهمه أمر الإسلام وأحزنه تحزب أهل الشرك عليهم فنوى غزوان أو هم بجهاد فقعد به ضعف أو أبطأت به فاقة أو أخره عنه حادث أو عرض له دون إرادته مانع فاكتب اسمه في العابدين وأوجب له ثواب المجاهدين واجعله في نظام الشهداء والصالحين اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وآل محمد صلاة عالية على الصلوات مشرفة فوق التحيات صلاة لا ينتهي أمدها ولا ينقطع عددها كأتم ما مضى من صلواتك على أحد من أوليائك إنك المنان الحميد المبدع المعيد الفعال لما تريد وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة فوت مرحوما فروض الشهداء.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا اس دشت میں کیا ہوگا، زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا اس دشت میں کیا ہوگا، سرور نے کہا بہنا سر تن سے جدا ہوگا، زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا. تو جائے گی سروریا پھر شام تلک بہنا، تو جائے گی سروریا پھر شام تلک بہنا، نامحرموں کا مجمع سر تیرا کھلا ہوگا، زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا. اونٹوں پہ حرم ہوگے کوٹھوں پہ تماشائی، اونٹوں پہ حرم ہوگے کوٹھوں پہ تماشائی، بیمار میرا بیٹا محبوب سے بلا ہوگا، زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا. ایک ظلم کی رسی میں بندھ جاؤ گے تم سارے، ایک ظلم کی رسی میں بندھ جاؤ گے تم سارے، اور تیگ یہ گردن میں عابد کا گلا ہوگا، زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا. مر جائے گی گٹ گٹ کے ایک روز سکینہ بھی، مر جائے گی گٹ گٹ کے ایک روز سکینہ بھی، باپ کا بے سر باپ کا بیٹی کو پیغام قضا ہوگا، زینب نے جو یہ پوچھا اس دشت میں کیا ہوگا، سرور نے کہا بہنا سر تن سے جدا ہوگا. محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل Muhammad. Let us all recite 5 times I am Mujibu, for the safety of all the Muslims, especially those in the conflict areas, for the safety of all of us, for all those who are sick and all those in need of du'as. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء، 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم صل على Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. With a loud salawat, we'll welcome Sheikh Bilal, inshallah. Surah al-Mubarakatul Fatiha ma salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Allah
Remembering the marhuma and all of our marhumin, one surah Fatiha, 3 times surah Ikhlas. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي أحدكم الموت ويقول رب لولا أخرتني إلى أجل قريب فأصدق وأكن من الصالحين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asri wa zaman. It's always unfortunate when we have to gather together to remember and to commemorate someone that we've lost in our community, especially when losing them is sudden, losing them is unexpected. Sometimes Allah actually has a mercy on us that when we go through a period of sickness and we can see the advancing of death, it gives us time to prepare as an individual and as a community, that we know what's coming ahead. But every so often Allah tests us and tries us, and He puts us in a situation where death comes suddenly. And in that moment, we want to be prepared that, God forbid, should that come to us, our family members, we've done everything we can. And there are advices for preparing for this death and knowing that it's coming and it's an eventuality of life. We are going to go through this experience. The discussion tonight is mentioning some of the advice that Allah gives us in the Quran for preparing for this moment for ourselves. Khususan, the conversation that we begin our discussion with comes from Surah al-Munafiqun, the 63rd chapter of the Holy Quran. Surah al-Munafiqun discusses the attributes of those who are the hypocrites, meaning they possess or represent faith externally, but internally they don't have any real belief. But what's interesting is that as Allah describes both historically and in the context of the information of how to recognize, to know, and to avoid, and what are the attributes of these people, He shifts His attention in the final 3 verses and begins a conversation with the believers where He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Final 3 verses, Allah begins and He says, oh, those of you who have faith. And He shifts complete direction. One minute He's talking about hypocrites. Next minute He's talking about believers. It may sometimes feel like that these two are disjointed conversations. In 1 minute you're criticizing, you're telling the stories of, discussing, describing the attributes of man alladhi kana al-munafiq, who is the one who is a hypocrite, who possesses or professes faith, but doesn't actually possess faith. And then in the second moment, Allah switches the entire conversation. He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, la tulhikum amwalukum wa la awladukum an dhikrillah. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. This discussion that Allah begins in the final 3 verses, He's suddenly speaking to the believer and giving an advice to the believer. And initially I saw these two as 2 separate conversations, but eventually the realization comes that the description of the munafiq is for the believer as well. To know how to recognize and to know the munafiq, the entirety of the conversation is speaking to the believer. So in the 1 minute, Allah is giving you a warning against the apparent enemy in this dunya, and then He's preparing you for the difficulty of the akhirah, and both are nasiha and advice to the mu'min in this one surah. One is for the apparent danger that when there is a hypocrite who intends you harm, be careful. The other is that hidden harm that prevents you from preparing for your akhirah. In this, Allah begins and He says, "Oh, those of you who have faith, لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله." Those of you who have faith, don't let your children and your wealth distract you from the remembrance of Allah. This in itself is something we all have a problem with, not intentionally. But when it comes to the mustahabbat, when it comes to the ibadat, we do the wajibat. And then we say we're busy with earning wealth, with taking care of our children, with responsibilities to society. And we use this as an excuse to put off all of the other good things we want to do. We'll do them when we're free. When Allah gives us instruction in the Quran, when Allah gives us instruction in His religion to go do good deeds, to go be busy in the ibadat of Allah, He's not telling us, oh, when you're free, when life is convenient, then come to my ibadah. The instruction of Allah is that you who are busy in your life, you want to be successful in this busyness that you have and these responsibilities that you have, the true success is that don't let these objects distract you from the worship of Allah. Now that doesn't mean don't take care of your kids, don't take care of your family. Sorry, boss, I can't take you to the park today. That's not the significance of what this statement is. Because al-malu wal-banun zinatul hayat ad-dunya. Allah did not forbid us from approaching and enjoying these bounties of this world. The significance of the conversation is priorities. Establishing our priorities. La tulhikum. Don't let them distract you. An dhikrillah. From the remembrance of Allah. How many of us use the excuse, I have to get up for work in the morning? Salatul Layl on the weekend. If on the weekend. And on the weekend, played a lot of pickleball. Got a little tired. Don't feel up to it. And so we become distracted with these other duties and these responsibilities. Allah is reminding us, and He's telling us that don't let these things that are good for you, they're enjoyable, they're pleasures, distract you from the ibadah. How many of us take the time to do all the taqibat, to recite the du'as after salat, to recite the nawafil? How many of us don't have the time to recite Quran because, well, I have work, I have obligations, the kids are waiting on dinner. And we use these excuses to delay these ibadat because life is coming in the way. It doesn't take much time, it simply takes priority. That if I label this as my priority, that I have to make sure that my family, my children, my job doesn't distract me from the worship of Allah, I can do it. The mistake we make is that our priorities are backwards. And Allah is reminding us that get your priorities in order in this life. لا تلهكم أموالكم ولا أولادكم عن ذكر الله. Then He continues with the second verse. وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَأْتِيَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ وَيَقُولُ رَبِّ لَوْلَا أَخَرْتَنِي إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ فَأَصَدَّقَ وَأَكُن مِّنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. This verse is where Allah gives us an advice. Sorry, I think I just, my phone will be okay. An advice about preparing for death and preparing for the hereafter. And He says, and spend from the rizq Allah has given you قَبْلَ أَن يَأْتِيَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ. Before death comes to you. Lest that when death comes to you, you say, رَبِّ لَوْلَا أَخَرْتَنِي إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ. Oh Allah, why don't you delay death for me just a little bit, so that I can give charity, فَأَصَدَّقَ, and be amongst the righteous, أَكُم مِّنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. This verse and its description talks about an important priority of using this life and what we possess in the service of Allah. And that taking the time that we possess now to ensure that we're preparing for our akhirah and what comes to us afterwards. There's a few interesting points in here. One is that Allah's use of the word rizq. Though in the first verse He specifies wealth and children, here He uses rizq. What is the bounty of Allah? Meaning that what Allah is asking us to spend from is not just about dollars and cents. It's about everything that we possess that we consider to be a bounty and a mercy from Allah, that from that make the sacrifice for the sake of Allah. The other interesting point that comes about is the realization that what Allah is asking us to do is not against the intellect. As a matter of fact, there are things that we do in the society today that are lessons for us and prepare us and teach us and give us Islamic values. Sometimes that seems almost counterintuitive, that American society is teaching me about Islam. But look and see what happens when you start your professional career. When you start your professional career, it begins with the idea of, okay, I'm going to go to work, and you get your paycheck. And when you get your paycheck back, the first thing you realize is all the money that I was supposed to earn isn't in this check. Part of it goes to taxes, part of it goes to other elements, and then they tell you, go and take a portion and invest in your 401k. And you tell a young man about this who starts his work and you say, son, go take out some of your money and put it in a 401k. The reaction is, what 401k? What does that mean? And then you have to explain. You say, well, you see, right now you can earn, right now you can work. But there's going to come a day where you don't want to work anymore. Maybe you're too old to work. So what you should do now is you take something from what you have the ability to earn today and you save it for a day in the future, when you're 65, when you're 70, when you're older, and you no longer possess the ability to work, so that the money you made today benefits you then. This attribute of today putting away for tomorrow is an Islamic attribute. This is what Allah is describing to us. That today you're alive, you're well. وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ. Spend from what Allah gives you today, so that tomorrow when you have no ability to change your book of deeds or do a good deed anymore, you've saved something for your akhirah. Which is why one of the things as we teach our children, we say, go set up a 401k, go develop an investment. Tell them, put 5% in your 401k, put 3% for your akhirah. Put 4%, put something for your akhirah, that you're investing in something in your hereafter. Something that will benefit you. This is an Islamic value that we're seeing established in society. The idea that sadaqah in particular is something that benefits us in the akhirah is something Allah has repeated throughout the history of Islam. That, for example, we even take a look in the times of the Bani Israel, in a story that talks about how a couple who wanted khair and asked Allah for assistance, and Allah sent from heaven assistance for them. They realized that this assistance that Allah gave them was actually from the benefit of hereafter that Allah gave them in dunya. And when they decided and they understood that this is something I could have benefited from in my akhirah and Allah gave it to me today, they said, no, I'd rather go through the difficulties of this life and save this goodness for my akhirah. This idea of saving goodness for your akhirah is not something foreign. And a very famous, we're going to take an aside. You guys okay? I don't know if the chairs put you to sleep or not, but if you're awake, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I mean, the lighting is set for a nap, honestly. Feels like, someone should go to sleep right now. In a very famous story from our 8th Imam, in the ziyarat of our 8th Imam, a sheikh takes a villager, he goes in front of the dhari, and the villager is following the example of the sheikh through the entire experience. Until eventually the sheikh holding the dhari says, Namiqa, Namiqa, Namiqa. 3 times he repeats, I don't want, I don't want, I don't. The villager doesn't repeat these 3 phrases, but when he leaves, he says, Sheikh, why would you stand in front of the Zariya of Imam Raza and say something like, I don't want? Sheikh says, when I'm on my deathbed, then ask me, I'll tell you. So sure enough, a number of years later, the villager hears the Sheikh is very sick, comes and sits next to him, and he says, Sheikh, you told me you would explain to me, why would you say I don't want to Imam Raza? And the Sheikh replies and he says, when I stood in front of the Zari, I asked Imam Raza that, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, I have a sickness, I'm asking for your shifa, for Allah to cure the sickness for me. It gives me a lot of trouble. I'm very sick. I need your help. In that moment, it was as if I could see Imam Raza reply to me. And Imam Raza had said that Allah has designated for you a special status in heaven because of the sickness that you have. But if you ask by my wasila, I will ask Allah and He will cure you. But I can't promise you that status Allah has designated for you in akhirah. So Imam Raza asked me, do you want the cure today? I said, no, I don't want. I'd rather have the reward in akhirah. Namiqa. 3 times Imam Raza asked me, are you sure? 3 times I replied, I don't want. That I'd rather have in akhirah than take something temporary in dunya today. The same concept we saw in the story of the Bani Israel, that when Allah sends them barakat from heaven and gives them their reward from heaven in dunya, and they realize that this reward was intended for akhirah, but by the sincerity of our pleading, Allah alleviated our difficulty in this world. They said, you know what? No, we'd rather have it in akhirah than in dunya. So now they had to figure out, what do I do with this rizq that Allah has given me from heaven? So they go to the Nabi of the time and they ask him, O Prophet of Allah, we have received a rizq from Allah that we are certain belongs to us in heaven, but we received it in dunya. How can we make sure we get it in heaven and not in dunya? The Prophet of Allah says, this is a very easy affair. It's not difficult. Give it away in charity here, and it will reach you in heaven there. This concept of giving of charity, فَأَصَدَّقَ وَأَكُمْ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, to give charity and to be from the righteous, is a common concept that Allah has told us and said that this charity is something special. This giving is something special that it benefits you in the hereafter, and I ensure that it reaches where you want it to. This is your savings account. This is your 401k for your akhirah. Use what you possess today to prepare for tomorrow. This idea that when we talk about that, well, I don't have to give it today. I'll just write it into my will, and when I die, it'll reach the people that it needs to. It doesn't work that way. And there's a very famous story about this, and the story comes from the life of our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Where in the life of the Prophet in the city of Medina, there happened to be a very wealthy man. And when he dies, he writes everything into his will, give everything in charity. And sure enough, the one who distributes this charity of this wealthy man is the Prophet himself. And the Prophet goes through and gives away everything the man possesses in charity, and charity, and charity, and charity, until the only thing that's left of his possession is referred to as Shab, a piece of a date. Now you have to understand something. In Arab culture, one date has no value. You don't buy date by, well, I'd like to buy 5 dates, please, and thank you. You buy dates by weight, by wazn. So when you want to buy dates, you go, give me half a kilo, give me a kilo, give me 2 kilos. And a kilo consists of many dates. So individually, to buy 1 date, there's no price for it. There's no value to it that I can sell you 1 particular date. This object that the Prophet held in his hand wasn't even 1 date. Kana shaqqat, a piece of a date. Rasulullah holds this up and he says, had this man in his life given away this date with his own hands, the reward he would have received with Allah is greater than all of this wealth that he left after his death. Now, what's interesting is many of our youth, they get confused by this hadith. I've actually sat in a class, had this conversation, and all the children stood up and said, we don't believe that. It doesn't make any sense. And I can tell you why. Because the value of giving is now looked at in the amount of money that's given. But that's a mistake. And the reason that's a mistake, it implies that Allah huwa al-Khaliq wal-Raziq. Allah is the creator and the one who gives rizq. It creates the implication in the mind of the listener that Allah needs your money. Allah doesn't need your money. Allah is the one who created us. Allah can provide for us. When Allah gives us the opportunity to give charity, it's not because He needs our money, it's because there is something that we need to attain with Allah that we cannot reach without the giving of the possessions that we have. The value of charity is not in how much you give. The value in charity is, what do I sacrifice from my desire to give for the sake of Allah? This is why the context of the verse, take a look at how Allah structures His thought. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُلْهِكُمْ أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَلَا أَوْلَادُكُمْ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Don't let your children and your wealth distract you from the remembrance of Allah. The value of that money is not what's priority. The value of those children is not what's for the priority. The priority is what will I sacrifice from my desire for the sake of Allah? And that's what our Prophet was teaching us. That this man who died with all this wealth was hedging his bets, that let me hold on to it that I may need it. And then once he was certain that he doesn't need it anymore, he gave it away. Allah doesn't need that from us. That doesn't benefit Allah, that doesn't benefit Islam, that doesn't benefit my faith. I made no sacrifice for the sake of Allah. Allah wants to see that sacrifice. Which is why, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مَا تُحِبُّونَ. You cannot attain salvation, victory, success, hatta, until you give away from that which you love. The significance of this, don't imagine that setting an insurance policy for $1 million that after I die, we'll give it to charity. That may be. This is not beneficial. This won't change anything for you at that point in time. Because now I didn't make a sacrifice. I didn't give for my desire. I didn't leave what I wanted for the sake of Allah. I did what I wanted and then I gave to Allah. Allah doesn't need that. The beauty of this sacrifice is that today when I have desire, when I have hunger, I go hungry and I go without my desire for the sake of Allah. And this is where we say that this is the description of the Salihin. فَأَقُمْ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, and be amongst those who are the ones who do righteousness. And same, Allah refers back to this reference in this verse as well too. وَأَقُمْ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, and to be amongst the righteous and to benefit from that status. This description comes back to the idea, well, what if I don't have money? Then this doesn't apply to me? The conversation isn't about me? No. As a matter of fact, this is why Allah's choice of words is so specific, that giving charity is not about wealth. Giving charity is from the rizq that Allah gives us. The rizq that Allah gives us is at times our age, is our youth, is at times our energy, is at times our knowledge, is at times our physical ability to do these actions, our ability to speak for the sake of Islam. Allah wants all of these in His service from when we possess them. When we have the energy that we can do work, that is my speech, is my etiquette, is my akhlaq only for a paycheck? What am I outside of my professional responsibility? Those good deeds that we do are thawab jariyah for us. The ability to take that time to teach a child, to sit and educate someone, to be patient with someone who doesn't understand the concept, to give from my energy to prepare the next generation. As long as that generation persists, I will receive the reward and benefit. This is what Allah wants from us, that don't just look at it and say that, oh, I don't have any money, so this doesn't talk to me. No. You may have an intellect, you may have strength, you may have time, you may have an ability that serves the cause of Islam, and my action, that whatever action I take is with the intention that Allah be pleased with me, not the fact of, oh, I'll be paid for this, I will receive a fiscal benefit for this action. Finally, the third verse in this conversation, as we mentioned, these three verses talk about description and an advice in preparation for this time of death. Allah describes in the second verse, and He says, أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَأْتِيَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتُ. That when death comes to you, you will ask in that moment, Rabbi, لَوْلَا أَخَرْتَنِي إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ. You're not going to ask for years. In that moment where death is on top of you, when you realize that the finality, that after this moment I don't possess an ability to do good anymore, you're going to ask in that moment, لَوْلَا أَخَرْتَنِي إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ قَرِيبٍ. A quick moment. Give me just a few minutes to do a good deed. Give me a few moments to make sure, because in that moment of death, many of us will have the doubt. Did I do enough? Did I accomplish enough with my life? If I have a minute, what can I do with this minute? I want to make sure that this minute is beneficial so that I can be amongst the righteous and I can ensure I did everything I could. But Allah completes this. لَن يُؤَخِّرَ اللَّهُ إِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُ. Allah does not delay when the time of death comes to a person. This reality of the finality of death is not something that was only for us. But even the Anbiya were subject to this, that when the moment of death came, there was no moving this moment of death. One of the conversations in Surah Furqan talks about Nabi Allah Idris. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ الْإِدْرِيسِ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. Here in this discussion about Nabi Idris in Surah Al-Furqan, Allah gives a description of Nabi Allah Idris, who is one of the forefathers of Nabi Nuh. And he's one of the Qudama, one of the oldest of the Anbiya. And his name Idris comes from the root word darasa, to study. And it's a description that says that in this world, the introduction of math, writing, and sewing were all done by Nabi Allah Idris. And Allah gives his description, Kana Siddiqan Nabiyya, that he was a truthful, honest man, and he was a prophet of Allah. This description of Nabi Idris, and there are a few interesting stories of Nabi Idris, but there's one that draws a parallel to one of the stories we hear about, the birth of Imam Hussein ibn Ali, Sayyid al-Shuhada, salamullahi alayhi. Where we see at the birth of Imam Hussein, Fitrus comes to Imam and receives shafa'ah for Imam because he has committed an act of disobedience to Allah and lost his wings. The Imam gives him shafa'ah and restores his wings. The attributes of the A'immah alayhimus salam, their origination many times comes because they're the successors of all of the Anbiya, that we see some of these in the history of the Anbiya. And one of the things that we see in the history of the Anbiya is that one of the original examples of shafa'ah for the angels was done by Nabi Idris. That at one point in time when Nabi Allah Idris is on this earth, there is an angel who has lost his wings and comes to the Prophet of Allah and says to the Prophet of Allah, "Oh Hujjatullah, oh representative of Allah, pray for me and give me your shafa'ah that Allah forgives me." And Idris alayhi salam prays, and Allah restores the wings of this angel. This angel now turns and says, "Oh Prophet of Allah, you have done me a kindness, you have done something for me. Please let me know if there's ever something I can do for you." The Prophet of Allah says, "Yes, there is something I want." The angel says, what can I do for you?" Nabi Idris says, "You know, Allah has told us about death and Malikul Maut, and I fear Malikul Maut. I want to meet him. I'd like to have the opportunity to meet him to remove my fear." The angel says, you gave me a kindness, whatever you want, no problem. He looks through the heavens and he sees Malakul Maut is between the 4th and 5th heaven. So he says, here, climb on my back, I'll take you. Climb on my back, he holds him. However, the angel takes the Prophet of Allah and transpires between the 4th and 5th heaven in the heavens and says, there's Malakul Maut, you can go see him. Go meet him if you want to. Sure enough, Nabi Allah Idris goes to meet Malakul Maut and introduces himself, and he sees a face of shock in Malakul Maut. And Idris has a little fun with it. In the narration, in the story, the way they describe the story, they say that it's fun for Idris that he says, oh, Malakul Maut, everyone is frightened to see you. Today you're frightened to see me. And Malakul Maut replies and says, no, Idris, it's not that I'm afraid to see you. I'm shocked and in awe of the hikmat and the wisdom of Allah. That Allah had issued a command to me to take your soul between the 4th and 5th heaven. And I imagined how the authority of Allah, the hujjah of Allah on the earth could be between the 4th and 5th heaven. Mahal, man does not transpire through the heavens. Yet here you are, and here is my command. And he takes the soul of Nabi Idris in that moment. Which is why the following verse in Surah Furqan is, وَرَفَعْنَاهُ إِلَى مَكَانٍ عَلِيًّا. And we raised Idris to a high location. This description of Makanin Aliyah is a description that talks about and says that the soul is taken in the body of Idris is in the heavens, not on this earth. That's why even that Prophet of Allah could not delay the moment of death, even if he didn't happen to be on this earth. And when death comes and its finality, there's nothing we can do to move it or change it. Allah doesn't change anybody's moment of death, that when that time comes upon us, we won't have the opportunity to even breathe out. In that moment, that soul is taken and that life ends. And if the Anbiya can't even extend their life, then we should know that when our time comes, that it will be finality for us. And this is our opportunity to do good and to take the advice of not me, of Allah directly, who begins this conversation to talk to the mu'mineen and prepare them. Use every minute of your energy and keep me in consideration. Prefer me over the priorities of your wealth and of your children, of your jobs and of your houses and your responsibilities, lest that the finality of life comes to you, and we don't know when the finality of life will come to us. And that you, in that moment, you ask me for more when I will not give. Allah promises, He says, لَن يُؤَخِّرَ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهَا. Allah does not extend for anyone if that final moment comes for them. These are the days that we remember Shahadat of Sayyidah Fatima. And amongst these days is the day of where this young lady left her family and left everyone behind. If there was anyone after the Holy Prophet who deserved to have their life continue, was this mother of the A'immah. And we saw that in these days they describe and they say that we saw the life of Sayyidah Fatima slowly drain, where she moved less and less, until all of a sudden one day, she too became busy in taking care of her children, and she began to feed them and take care of them as if it was the last time that she would do so. How difficult it is for a child to lose their mother, that they describe and they say that when Sayyidah Fatima, her soul leaves her body and Hassan and Hussein come home, they come and they are told that, come have food. They said, we never eat without our mother. Have you ever seen us eat anything in the absence of our mother? Let us go to our mother. When they stand by this body of Sayyidah Fatima, from one side Imam Hassan, from one side Imam Hussein, Ya Ummah Jawabini, oh mother, answer me. Imam Hussein famously, the narrators write, says a word, oh mother, answer me before my soul leaves my body. Imam Hassan turns to his brother and he says, A'adham Allah laka al-ajr ya Hussein, our mother has left us, that our mother has died. The two children run to Amir al-Mu'mineen and describe the passing of their mother. They say that we saw Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Prophet's mosque stand up and then sit down, stand up again and then sit down. When one of the companions asked, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, you are the bravest of all men, why do we see you in such a state of confusion? He says, I have lost my partner. I don't know what I am to do in this moment. They describe and say the final farewell between this mother and her children, which comes in these days, is they say that every child was told when their mother had been given her ghusl and kafan, come bid farewell to your mother. Come bid farewell. Every child came, but one Hussein stood back and says, I will not go to my mother until she calls to me. Isa was one who loved his mother, and when he called, his mother raised raised their hands and called to him, I am no less than Isa in the eyes of my mother. They describe and say that the hands of Sayyidah Fatima came up. Hussein came and attached himself to her chest. Jibreel calls out, Oh Ali, there is a majlis and weeping in the heavens, seeing Hussein on the chest of his mother. Remove him, lest that the heavens collapse out of the grief of this loss. I would say, Oh Jibreel, where were the malaika? Kana Shibru, Jalisun ala Sidra. Why then did the heavens not fall? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. Raise your hands in dua 10 times. Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. يا محمود بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadah from us. Ya Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to Marhuma, Maghfura, Khairun Nisa, Jafar, Isa, as well as all of our marhumin and all those who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Oh Allah, we have gathered here with hajat. By the right of this Thursday night, by the right of the Quran and mention of Ahlul Bayt, fulfill all of our hajat. Ya Allah, those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, give aman and peace and security to the mu'mineen who are suffering through strife and difficulty around this world. Oh Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. Entitle us to the ziyarat of Imam Hussein in this world and the shafa of Imam Hussein in the hereafter. Once again, 1 Surah Fatiha, 3 times Surah Ikhlas, لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad. Bismillah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى رحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الناس. السلام عليك يا وارث المحب والهدى والقوة الملكة والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليكم يا أسفياء الله وولي الناس. السلام عليكم يا أنصار المحارم. وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والعبد الدافع والعقيل مجيب إلى دعوة ربه